All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to go over World War One. We're going to look at the road to the war. We're going to look at causes, and then we're going to finish up with how the war actually ends. So it's going to take a couple parts, but you need to watch it, answer the questions. So this is chapter 22 in your book. So we're going to look at war and revolution. So when you look at World War One, we look at the rise of nationalism, and we've been talking about that in period 4 when it first kind of started, and it started at the end of period 4. And we're going to really see nationalism being one of the main causes of World War One. So nationalism is extreme pride in your country and your ethnicity, your race. And so when you look at the word nationalism, and if you take out the ism and the AL, right, it's nation. And so some people, thanks to imperialism, they haven't had their own nation in a long time. They've been conquered and they've been taken over by other people. So like Britain had taken over India, they'd taken over a lot of the Middle East, they'd taken over parts of Asia. And so some of those countries were starting to feel a little resentful. Because a part of that imperialism, remember, is that Anglo-Saxon superiority, where the white race felt that they were superior to the people who they were taking over. And they had been making the locals, the group that was there originally, basically feel like crap. And so you're going to see the rise of nationalism in areas that are colonies, or they are imperialistically dominated by another country. So we look at internal dissent. So 19th century competition over trade and the colonies, that's imperialism. And remember, there's this big land grabbing, like the scramble for Africa. You know, all the European countries are trying to get into Africa, and they're all dicing it up. We look at ethnic and nationalistic ambitions in the Balkans. So when you look at Eastern Europe, this is actually going to be one of the big areas that have been taken over, like by the Habsburgs, by the Austrian Empire, and have been taken over by Russia a lot as well, but under the Romanovs. And so what you're seeing is people who are starting to get a little upset, and they're getting upset because they feel like they don't have a voice in their government. They're being dominated by a foreign power, and some people sometimes feel like that foreign power isn't something that they're okay with. It's just like the American colonists. King George III is thousands of miles away. There's an ocean between you. Why wouldn't you rebel? Out of sight, out of mind. And so what you're kind of seeing with some of these areas is kind of the same thing. Also, remember what we talked about when we looked at period 3 and period 2 is one of the big reasons why empires do collapse is that they don't have one factor that makes them united. And so this is going to be a hard part for these imperialistic countries, is to actually find some sort of unity in the area. You know, it could be a religious thing, it could be a political thing, it could be an ethnic thing, but they don't really have any unifying factors. So the elites are going to fear socialists and labor union strikes and violence. Remember, socialism and communism, they're not the same thing, but there's a lot of similarities in them. But socialism and communism really only apply to people who are very, very poor. Because in socialism and communism, it kind of promises equality, that everybody is going to have the same. Now, in practice, this has never worked. But a socialist or communist government is supposed to kind of be a utopia, where if I have $40,000, you have $40,000, and everybody has $40,000. It has never worked in practice. But if I don't ever have anything, you know, that sounds pretty good. Socialism and communism never appeal to middle class, and it doesn't appeal to rich people. It really appeals the most to the people who are living in poverty, who are living below the standard of living. And when you look at the areas that have been conquered by imperialism, that was one of the big things about imperialism, is the economic markets in the area, is to go ahead and use those areas that you have conquered for selling your industrial goods. So when Britain conquered India, you know, they taught them how to grow opium and they taught them how to grow cotton. They weren't putting factories in there. They were making a raw material resource for them. And so the areas of these kind of areas that have been conquered, they're very poor, and so socialism and communism appeals to them. there's going to be labor union strikes and violence in the area. Would an active foreign policy create internal unity? And this is kind of one of these questions, like if you have a foreign policy that would be like go to, pro, maybe you could actually get the people that you've conquered united under this, maybe a militaristic, foreign policy, maybe one about conquering other countries. And so this is what you kind of see growing is militarism. And so militarism is the belief in having a large, strong, dominant military. And so during this time period, you don't really have like an air force. They do have planes, they just haven't figured out quite how to do everything with planes like we do today. So they have large foot soldiers, they have large armies, they'll have a large navy. And you'll see military conscription, and that's just a military draft. And you'll see that in places like in Germany. You won't see it in Britain and America. And if you have an automatic draft where at 18 every boy has to serve in your military, you have a very large army. And that means if you do go to the war, that it is going to be a very destructive war because you're going to have more soldiers who are already prepped and ready to go to war. So the development of inflexible plans in the event of war. So we look at the Schlieffen Plan, and this is a plan by Germany. And Germany creates this plan really in the 1890s. And it is a plan in case they get attacked. So they have a plan of if France attacks them, if Russia attacks them, if they get attacked in the east and then they get attacked in the west, they'll have a two-front war. And they know how they're already going to fight it. And they know that in the 1890s. So when the war actually breaks out in 1914, they've got a plan of how they're going to fight it. So one of the things that will help you understand World War I is this thing called mania. It's an acronym. So the M stands for militarism, the A stands for alliances, the N stands for nationalism, and the I stands for imperialism, and then the last A is going to be assassination. So it's MANIA, militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and assassination. So we looked at militarism, the building up of large militaries. Alliances is something that we've been kind of talking about with like foreign policy, is that you are starting to have friends for mutual protection. It's a military protection. It can be an economic thing as well. So certain countries are naturally allies. They're naturally friendly to each other. Nationalism is your ethnic pride, the belief in your nation, and you're willing to die for it. Imperialism is the belief of conquering weaker nations to make yours strong, and it's normally using the economic policy of mercantilism. And then the last part is this assassination. So we're having a crisis in Eastern Europe in the Balkan area of Serbia. Serbia had been taken over by the Habsburgs, by the Austrian Empire. And so what had happened was Archduke Ferdinand, he's traveling through Sarajevo, which is in the Bosnian areas in Serbia. And he's actually, doing his parade route. And an assassin from the Black Hand, which is a terrorist group, it's a nationalistic Serbian group. They would like to see a free Serbia. They did not want to see the Habsburgs controlling their country anymore. They wanted to have their own place, their own country, their own government run by them. Princeps is the assassin. He's going to go ahead and assassinate Archduke Ferdinand. Archduke Ferdinand is the heir to the Austrian throne. And you cannot kill an heir and think that anything is actually going to, be water under the bridge. If you kill an heir, the country is definitely going to react. It would be the same as if somebody hurts a political figure here in America. You're going to have some sort of reaction. So the Austrian government reacts, and they blame all of Serbia. Who's really responsible for it is this nationalistic terrorist group, the Black Hand. But all of Serbia gets thrown in on the blame. And because Austria is going to go ahead and blame Serbia, Austria will declare war on Serbia. Serbia has had an alliance, and it's a secret alliance. They've had an alliance with Russia. So now that Austria has declared war on Serbia, Russia, thanks to the alliance system that these countries are building, they have to go ahead and join in on the war. So Austria is going to now turn to their friend, Germany, and they will ask Germany for help. Now, the reason why they're going to ask Germany for help is that the Austrians and the Germans share a common history, a common background. It's just like the United States and Britain. We share a common heritage. So, same thing with Austria and Germany. They share a common heritage. And so, William II, or Wilhelm II, that's really his name, he's a Kaiser, which means he's a monarch. He is going to promise Austria full support against Serbia. And he's basically going to give them a blank check. He's going to do anything that he needs to do in order for Austria to win. Now remember, Germany's been building up their military, and Otto von Bismarck had united Germany. And now you've got this new Kaiser in there, Kaiser Wilhelm II. And his job is he wants to make a name for the German military. He wants to take over this area. And so this is just a good opportunity. They've been building up their military, as everybody's been building up their military. And now you've got this great big war that's going to break out. And you don't build a military just in case of. They are building these militaries, and you've been putting millions of dollars into it. Now this is an opportunity for you to test the strength of your new military that you've been creating. And so when Wilhelm II gives this blank check, he basically is saying, we'll do anything we can to ensure the Austrian Germany win. So Austria is going to give that ultimatum to Serbia, and they're basically going to say, either you go ahead and accept our rule or we declare war. They declare war. So it led to the Austrian Declaration of War, July 28, 1914. Russia has to mobilize because they've made an alliance with Serbia, and Russia is going to refuse to back down. Germany's going to have to declare war on Russia. This is the alliance part of that mania. It's the entangling alliances. It's a chain reaction. Austria had made an alliance with Germany, so if Austria goes to war, Germany's got to throw in. Serbia had made an alliance with Russia, and so when Serbia gets declared war on, Russia's got to jump in. Now, Russia's got its own alliances too, so now their allies have got to come to their help. And so what you really have is monarchs fighting other monarchs again in Europe. And America will stay neutral. We will stay out of this. So in the summer of 1914, America, we really go quiet on this issue. We are adamant that we will not join the war. And matter of fact, President Woodrow Wilson will win his second term basically on that campaign. Is he kept us out of the war. So there's a re-election year here in the United States in 1914, and he decides he's going to keep us out of the war. And Americans like that. So when you look at the plan, this is the Schlieffen plan, and I'll go ahead and get it a little bit larger here in just a second. Germany had been planning. They've been assuming that they would have a two-front war. Because remember, Germany is the crossroads of Europe. Here's Germany. And at some point or another, everybody has been through Germany. And so Germany had decided that they were going to go ahead and make a plan in case they had to fight a two-front war. A two-front means you've got your army divided. So they'll have a front here, and they'll have a front here. So they have one in the east and one in the west. And so they know that they've got to take on the Russians, so they've got to go ahead and put their armies, mobilize their armies, and put them on this side. They also know that they've got to mobilize their army and get them ready to invade France, because they see the French as a little bit weaker than they actually see the Russians. So right here, what they're hoping to do is stop the Russian army from invading. But the Germans are planning on going through Belgium, which is a neutral country. That means they take no sides in a war. They're going to go through Belgium to get into Paris itself. They'll also go along the weaker areas of France, and they'll try and get into France that way. That's what they're hoping to do. They do know that it's going to take Russia a lot longer to mobilize for war, which is why they're going to put a lot of their effort into just stopping Russia from invading, and why they're going to go ahead and put some effort into invading France. They feel like France is going to go ahead and fall. So